Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest Urban Living News webinar. We're here today to talk about the built-to-rent revolution. You are in the right place. This isn't about holidays in Greece. This is the built-to-rent revolution session, and we've got a great panel to discuss the topic for an hour or so this afternoon. My name is George Sell. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of International Hospitality Media, and we are a publisher of online B2B websites for the hospitality and real estate markets, and we also organise conferences and award schemes. Now, these Urban Living webinars are sponsored by payments company Flywire, and we're just going to watch a short video to find out some more about them.
Flywire helps travel businesses reduce costs and improve guest experience when collecting payments. Without Flywire, travel payments can be costly and inefficient, requiring the business to work with multiple vendors like payment processors, merchant banks, and more. The process results in difficult manual reconciliation, high fees on both sides of the transaction, and no dedicated support for payers or merchants. We solve these pain points through our Flywire Advantage, the combination of our next-gen payment platform, our proprietary global payment network, and our travel-specific software backed by our deep industry expertise to improve both sides of the payment equation. Guests pay in their local currency and with their preferred payment method, whether it be credit card, local bank transfer, mobile wallets, or other local payment methods. Flywire leverages our significant scale to ensure travel businesses and guests alike enjoy low fees and competitive exchange rates. Businesses receive the exact amount that they bill in the currency of their choice for both domestic and international payments, all reconciled to the penny. If there are any questions along the way, Flywire's around-the-clock multilingual support and dedicated account managers are there to help. To learn more, visit travel.flywire.com and request a demo today.
Okay, so thanks to Flywire. You can see their contact details in the chat if you'd like to find out more. Our other sponsor is Charles Hope, and we are just going to watch a very quick video to find out more about them. So thanks to Charles Hope, and again, you can see their contact details in the chat if you'd like to find out more. So today's session is going to go on for an hour. We'd like to make it as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please do submit them using either the chat or the Q&A function in Zoom, and we'll get around to answering as many of those as we can. Everybody who has registered for the session will receive a link to a recording of it via email over the next few days. So I just wanted to show a few slides of some stories that we've run over the last few months on our Urban Living News website, just to give you a flavour of some of the topics we are likely to touch on today, because this is a really vibrant sector, built to rent. There's loads going on, particularly in terms of investment, which we'll get to shortly. You can see there, the UK sector has recorded a record investment for the first half of this year. We're seeing new brands move into the space with service department company Flying Butler launching its Mura Living brand. And we're even seeing new paths to investment with Night Dragon tokenizing one of their London build-to-rent blocks and selling NFTs to retail investors. The inventory across the country is growing fast. We're seeing, again, new names into the space, some household names in this case with John Lewis, the retail giant. And we're seeing some interesting things happening in terms of technology, particularly resident-facing technology. So we've got a cracking panel today. I'm going to ask the guys to introduce themselves in turn and tell us a little bit about themselves and what they do. And we'll go from left to right as we see them on the screen. So Brendan, good afternoon to you. Would you like to introduce yourself first, please?
Hi, I'm Brendan Geraghty. I'm very pleased to be here. I am the CEO of the UKAA, which represents the build-to-rent industry here in the UK, and is really the authority on build-to-rent. It's a growing sector. It's destined to be very big. Depending on who you talk to, 500 billion pounds. And we are there representing the full spectrum of membership, from investors and lenders through developers, operators, consultants, and suppliers. My personal background is I'm an architect. I spent 10 years designing build-to-rent buildings before taking on this job, and yeah, very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. And Russell, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. So I'm Russell Markou, Head of Operations for Quintain Living. I've been with Quintain now for nearly 7 years, just prior to our first operating assets back in 2016. And we basically own and operate all the residential apartments in Wembley Park. My background is prior to joining Quintain Living is hotels. So worked as operations director for Hilton, and previous to that Radisson Blu, and prior to that I was in construction management. So quite a broad range of experience, which I'm blessed with. So happy to be here.
Thanks, Russell. And finally, Clint, welcome to you.
Thank you for having me. Yes, Clint Bartman. I'm the director of BTR consultancy for Cortland Consult. Cortland Consult is a BTR consultancy basically focusing on helping developers, operators, and investors into the BTR sector develop the right products that come out of the ground, and working with them to make sure they're operationally effective and efficient, and consulting them through that entire process, and using our research and our data in the background to make sure that they're making good decisions in regards to their investments. So, and my background, from in the UK is, been in the BTR for a few years now, and then focused on PBSA, first coming into the sector here, and then in the States, obviously I'm American, but I've been in the UK now for 10 years. In the States, I also did student housing, is what it would be called there, instead of PBSA. But it is truly, the BTR sector is booming here, and we're excited about it. So a lot going on.
Thank you, Clint. Okay, Brendan, I'd like to start with you with our first topic, please. Let's pick up on this investment piece. A recent report from CBRE said that the sector had a record first half of this year for investment with 1.76 billion. And you actually pointed out earlier that Savills have put the figure quite a bit higher than that as well, at 2.5 billion invested in the sector so far this year. So do we expect this upward trend to continue for the foreseeable future? I think you're on mute, Brendan.
Yeah, sorry, forgive me. I think the short answer to that is yes. I think there are geopolitical issues that are going to affect that in the short term. I think the cost of construction and inflation and other more localized issues will have an impact. But I think the trajectory is very strong for growth in this sector. And again, many of the property agencies have released reports on this, and depending on who you read, that full maturity, as I mentioned, it's destined to be worth about 500 billion pounds. At the moment, it's probably sitting at around the 9.5 billion pounds in terms of value. So there's an awful lot there's a long way to go and a lot going on. And if we look at the committed funds, so totting up the committed funds to build to rent in the UK, across the world, I mean, it's in the trillions of people who have an interest in the sector and who are keen to come and be involved in this, what is quite accurately described as a revolution.
Thanks, Brendan. Clint, one of the aspects of your job is sourcing investors, putting investors in touch with the right build-to-rent deals. Is the appetite as strong as ever, and do you think it's going to continue the way it is?
It is. The appetite is strong across the sector. And put it into scale, I think Brendan made a good comment there. It is a 5 million or 100 million, 500 billion pound sector, and we're just scratching the surface at this point. The appetite's strong. It is shifting a little bit to some more forward commitments compared to forward funding and some other different arrangements. but we are seeing still, the same excitement about coming into the market. The current BTR market is we've probably built out about 2 to 3% of the total rental market in the UK. So there's a massive amount to be built. I know we're probably comment on, single family housing or single family BTR soon. So, but it's a matter of, there is a beautiful rental sector here that is quite attractive. Then you have, even though, yes, there is challenges with supply chain, there is challenges with, some planning authorities and things that are going on, it's still an attractive investment market because the UK has always been an attractive investment market. It's a very stable political environment overall in time. So hopefully that continues. And coming out of the pandemic, I think we're just all kind to, end with, the war and the other conflicts that are occurring that kind of shifted things in the last 6 months. We're still seeing the investment and the attraction from investors looking. So it will be the political environment that could make the biggest impact in regards to keeping things moving. But I think that we'll continue to see that investment, especially into the primary markets.
Yeah, thanks, Clint. Russell, as you mentioned, you've been heavily involved up at Wembley Park, where Quintain Living has got several projects. Is the appetite within the company as strong as it was, and are you looking for future similar opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, look, judging from the CBR report and the pipeline for the remainder of this year, the way it's looking, likely to exceed 2021's record-breaking year. I'd say yes, we expect to continue, albeit with the potential to slow a little as a result of inflation, interest rates rising, but long-term, obviously, still robust. But that said, in terms of consumer demand, with interest rates rising and mortgage lender criteria getting tighter, it's becoming increasingly harder to buy. And for those who currently own or seeing increase in their mortgage rates, this is resulting in rental being, an attractive option. So that's remaining robust. I mean, we've seen a lot of evidence that supports this in Quintain Living, albeit on a small scale in the scheme of things, through fast levels of leasing and the ability to drive rent increases at a sensible level. So others in the BTR sector, as Clint's mentioned, are seeing the similar trends. So therefore, in the short and medium term, we expect to see continuation of investment into the sector. And obviously, we are always looking for other opportunities outside of Wembley Park in terms of managing other third-party assets as a third-party operator. So yeah, it's still a healthy appetite, but like I said, potentially a slowdown with the current climate.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Russell. Brendan, of the 1.76 billion that CBRE quoted, nearly a third of that were deals in the single family housing space. Is this going to be the single biggest driver for growth, do you think?
I'm not sure if it's going to be the single biggest driver, but I think it's going to be a very strong and powerful driver. I think there's a number of factors which contribute to that. One is culturally we like homes or houses rather than flats, I think, in the UK. Also, there's a very mature supply chain for single family housing with all the house builders. And it's kind of an easy, when I say easy, it's a simpler proposition that there may be a housing estate of which a proportion is sold on to build to rent. So speaking to some of the developers and funders, the appetite is for perhaps smaller number of units, than some of the urban blocks. But also the great advantage of single family housing is that it has a real nationwide reach. And so from the perspective of how build to rent kind of contributes to the leveling up agenda and the spread of this living option, it really, single family housing is allowing that reach to continue and to grow really into all corners of the country. And I just think that's, all those things combined are going to mean it's a very, very strong area for build to rent.
Yeah. Clint, what's your hunch on single family housing?
I mean, single family housing, we're seeing right now is, people going in, investors going in and purchasing, 50 to 100 units in the scheme and working through that. And they're seeing that attraction because they can operate them in a fairly effective way. And they're able to do that. And they're able to, like Brendan mentioned, getting scale and to get, a cross-sectional piece of the, the entire market. There is a favor towards how, individual single family homes. In most markets right now, you have your home, homes being built or people renting homes. All we're doing is putting a better product in there that's more focused on being a rental product that is actually going to be institutionally managed. So it'll provide a better service from the landlord. Now, the next phase of this is going to be your true BTR entire developments, which will be 500 unit, 300 unit developments with community centers, all, perfectly built to, those are, you're looking at present made, Casa, some other groups that are doing things, and looking at a full community that way. Now that is true build to rent single family housing. And that will be, those are going to be very sought after. I think that market there has a lot of potential. It's going to add to the growth of what's being invested in the UK as build to rent. But still, your urban centers, they take longer to come out of the ground. And that's, I think, why we're seeing that occurring, where the home builders they've been in these sites for a while. They've had time to develop into a certain space. They know how many, what they can fit on a scheme. So they're more advanced in their development, where your urban centers are truly coming back to that. So I think it's just a shift of that. But I think we're going to see investment in both of them. And people have to have confidence in urban center. There's so many small towns around around the UK that are great, have great little economies. They build to rent would do well. But you can't put a 500 unit scheme in the middle of it. It just doesn't fit. You have to really look at it and say, how are you going to do this properly? So it's like, that's where we're going to see, I think we'll see more single family home around in the suburbs, if we're going to put it in that perspective, the major cities. Then we'll see the major cities still have your nice, your big flats, your apartment complexes.
Yeah. And do you think that the product that's specifically designed for build to rent in the single family area will eventually replace what's happening at the moment? Because I mean, let's be frank, a lot of the stuff, it wasn't built to rent. It was built for general market sale, but somebody's come along and offered to take a chunk of it off the house builder, and they've said yes please. So it's not specifically designed for this market. Do you think that will eventually fall by the wayside and the product will all be bespoke for build to rent? It
will. I mean, we have clients right now that we're working with to help design that specification you'd put into a build to rent single family home. Just thinking, it's the small factors, durability, how are you going to get internet connectivity to it? How are you going to communicate with them? The pods, the bathroom pods, the modular construction, can you utilize that to make it more efficient in the building process? It's going through all those steps and just making a more robust product as a rental product. Then how do you bring services to that in a collaborative way? And then, then you can enhance you can enhance the communities, enhance the rents by putting in community services, having events and those types of things in those communities, so you can enhance things in different ways. And, that's a matter of effort. But yes, we will see the product change. We're going to see that, like I said, we're working on those designs right now with different vendors and just trying to figure those things out.
Thanks, Clint. Russell, are you guys looking at offering product for a broader demographic range in future schemes, including single families, even though you're probably looking at urban locations?
Yeah, it's probably not a strong area of expertise for me in the single family housing. Clint's pretty much answered everything that I would have said, of course. But no, for us, it's early days for single family to draw any strong conclusions. But as per my previous comments, renting demand will remain strong short to medium term, which will support all forms of rental housing. But we have schemes in Ireland, in Quintain, not Quintain Living, of course, which is more sort of down that route. But not more I can add to this, to be honest. It's still an area that I've not really had much experience in.
Okay, thanks, Russell. So if we break down the activity that was analysed in the CBRE report, in Q1 of this year, activity was mainly concentrated in London and the South, whereas Q2 saw capital mainly deployed across the regions. Brendan, where do you think are going to be the development hotspots for next year and beyond? Where is there going to be the biggest markets, do you think?
I think the markets are going to grow and expand, and there's sort of, in very simple terms, there's going to be two markets. There's going to be urban build to rent, and then there's going to be suburban build to rent of the single family homes, and that's probably the simpler one. I think that going back to my point on the supply chain, I think that the reach of that is just going to increase, or the pace of that of those type of projects will both increase in number and speed, because of the supply chain. And to Clint's point as well, I think that there'll be need to be a massive product evolution within that, as well as integrated services, and the community is created, which is something which is not always part of the sales agenda. If we look at the urban build to rent, I mean, I think the build to rent 101 is still very relevant. Be close to a transport interchange if you're in a big city. Make sure that there is employment, that there's relevant employment for the customers, the residents to go to. But what we're seeing, I think, but also I think from a business perspective, is where is their rental headroom? So I think all of these things combined, there's no, I think build to rent is slowly going to march outwards. London started, Manchester has become very mature very quickly. We're now seeing the Leeds and the Sheffields and the Birminghams of this world moving very, very rapidly to deliver their own product. And that's just going to continue and evolve. But we're also seeing smaller cities. If you look at the build to rent map, we have Exeter, we have Aberdeen, we have some coming up in Belfast. I mean, it is a relevant model for the entire nation. It does have different viability and underwrite requirements, and it's not going to fit everywhere. But anywhere where people need housing and people need somewhere to live, build to rent will be able to provide some sort of a solution, whether it be through the housing model or through the residential block model. So I just see it expanding. So where are the hotspots? We've started with the main cities, we go to the secondary cities, and you'll just make your way down that list, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Brendan. Clint, how far down do you the kind of tiers do you think build to rent can go and be viable? And are there any particular markets where you're seeing projects coming through which are new, where there hasn't been build to rent product before? So obviously,
we see them all the time. In general, you know, your strong markets, you know, London is a market. You know, the GLA and some other things slow things down in regards to how to move through planning, but it's taking longer. But people are still focusing on the major, you know, central hubs where you have a transport point. So, you know, the Crossrail, Elizabeth line, those things opening up have made things kind of sprout a little bit on those pockets. But we are seeing, you know, your major, you know, your cities. Manchester seems to be the most mature market at this point, and it still has a lot of room to go. It's still producing very well for everybody who's got something up, and you know, the developments still keep coming. Birmingham, Leeds, you know, we are seeing, you know, the same thing. Birmingham it will be outpaced. You know, in development pipeline wise, it's going to be outpacing Manchester soon. So we'll see Leeds follow that too. They're just great. You know, they have a few things going for them. It is truly the demographics in the area that support a build to rent product or an offering. And all we're doing is replacing, you know, we're putting in better products for people to live in, and then the other products will become, you know, a more, you know, a more affordable product, the ones they move out of. So it'll be interesting to see that. We are seeing Belfast as well. Belfast did actually had some really good rental growth in the last year. We've seen rental growth across the entire UK at around 10.5, 11%, with some, you know, 14% in London and some other areas, you know, Manchester and you know, the 10%. So even just the 10% rental growth in this first 6 months of the year is pretty fascinating. But it's true. A little bit of that is, you know, good newer product coming online, which is making the rental growth in the areas, and a lack of supply. There's just no place for people to live, so they're having to move up. But the reality is it's producing rental, you know, properties for people to live in that have things they wouldn't have before. So even comparing a new build to rent building compared to a 5 year general, you know, 5 years ago build to rent building, it's not apples to apples for anymore, whether it be the amenity race or just the fact that services are better applied now inside buildings. You know, Quintain's a great example of, you know, different buildings, different topologies for different people, and they do a great job of servicing them. And it's really, it's fascinating to, you know, the people live out there because they want that service and they want the product that's there. And that's really a great thing. I think that we're going to see more of that. But as far as towns, we've got projects, you know, we're looking at everything from, you know, Preston to Bournemouth to, you know, in any, you know, Stockport, Hutton, a bunch of different places. All, you know, Newcastle seems to be, you know, has some traction at this point in time. But we are seeing Scotland as well move up. Scotland has some really good rental growth stories right now, and the yields are still strong there. So we're seeing some good, you know, that's Glasgow and Edinburgh. Edinburgh's complicated as far as, you know, finding sites, but Glasgow's got still some potential there. But it's just getting through the process of getting the developments out of the ground.
Thanks, Clint. Brendan, with the sector broadly based around you know, a build and hold or a buy and hold model, and the relatively slim margins that come along with that, we've obviously got materials prices going up, we've got labour shortages, and now we've got cost of borrowing going up significantly. How do you think this is going to affect the development pipeline over the next couple of years?
I think we've got some choppy waters ahead. I think you know, the margins are very difficult. I mean, I'm sure others, Clint and Russell, can comment on how capital responds, but it seems to me, if I just comment on that very briefly, patient capital seems to do better than shorter capital, if you like. But because, I mean, the underpinning, and I think sort of the inflationary pieces around that are currently here and all the rest of it will, of course, they're going to have an impact. When I've read up on this, in the long term, the storm will be ridden. But I think there's some deep issues here, and probably the biggest one is climate change in the background to all of this, which is going to be further complicated by the building safety bill, which is coming in, and how that's going to impose additional burdens on everybody, but build to rent is no exception from this. So I think construction costs are a really, really tricky one. What are the options? There's not enough labor out there. There's not enough competency in construction. There, of course, is great competency in construction. There just isn't enough of it. So what are the options? Well, the options is to reinvest in off-site, or not reinvest, invest more in off-site solutions. At the moment, the industry is slightly risk averse. Everybody seems to want to be first to be second, but unless the industry recognizes we are in a transition to dealing with a very different world, which is not just a labor and competence supply issue, but also the issues around climate change. Through this transitional process, through this change, we're all going to have to sort of slightly compromise and perhaps take a little bit of risk as we move into better, cleaner, more predictable, more cost-effective solutions. So I think we really are on the horns of a dilemma where there's a great deal of threat and challenge coming to us generally as a society, and build to rent in particular, and we haven't quite balanced that with our willingness to meet that challenge. Intellectually, yes, but on the ground, perhaps there's still quite a long way to go. So I think it's going to be choppy waters for some time. I think this transition is a 10-year transition at the very, very least, certainly from a construction and delivery perspective.
Yeah. Clint, are you seeing projects that may have looked viable and extremely attractive 6 months ago perhaps come into doubt with the various factors that I alluded to earlier?
We have recently seen, just different projects, that exact thing. They're just becoming a little too risky, I should say. What we're seeing is some developers taking a step back and taking more time to think about the scheme. They'll just take a little more time and waiting to see if construction costs level out or become more stable. But we're seeing people, this is where, local councils and everybody's gonna have to get together and say, okay, if we're going to do this, we have to make this more viable. And we were restricting, having so many, DMR units in this scheme. Maybe we need to reduce that. We need to go back to the council and say, if we want us to build something here and invest in your community, we need your support. And it might be, adding more units. It might be asking for less, affordable housing in the scheme. It might be doing certain things. But yes, we are seeing that. But we're seeing people still moving towards development. We see more people asking about BTR compared to just regular, PRS or residential, moving towards just strictly BTR and trying to understand how they can make that work as a development, which is exciting for us, because we know long term that we'll be able to get these things through and then get planners to understand what it's all about, and then get the councils, everybody on board, and then we know we can help communities with BTR. So we know that it can help a whole area just become better, and that's our objective, is to get them up so then we can all continue to have nice places to live. What it is.
Yeah. Well, while we're on that subject, Clint, actually we've had a question in from David Wilson who was referring to some of the locations you mentioned earlier, and he asked, are the build to rent hotspots an indication of planning authorities who have grasped the concept? Where are we in terms of local authorities and planners understanding what the sector's trying to do?
To answer that question, it is very local. I wouldn't say there's anybody that says this is what we should be doing in this city. It's more that they realize they need housing, and they have a shortage of quality housing, and they're just realizing they need something in there. So if you're going to be looking at residential in general, why not do a portion of, regular build to sell, or we want to call it, and then a portion of build to rent, and have an institution being there managing that, that property, and making that more of a hub of your city. So there's no councils that are being very aggressive towards BTR or wanting it. You do have some neighborhoods where you're from councils. There's a few areas saying that there's too much BTR, even that they don't even really have any yet. They're just hearing the rumors about BTR, or that it's coming. But the reality is once a product gets established and you realize that there's an institutional owner, there's an institutional operator that's running it making the place, keeping it up, keeping it in a good spec and a good position. It does enhance communities, and I think that's where it's just going to take some time for people to see that, and it's starting to happen. You can do tours now of different areas. You can actually go see sites. You can go to Manchester and see these beautiful towers popping out of the ground, and you realize that these are in better shape than the one next to it, and they're built at the same time, and you're going, okay, this one's built to rent. It makes you realize why we should be doing this.
Yeah, yeah. You could also do a tour of Wembley as well, Russell.
Yeah, exactly. Wembley. Yeah, it's beautiful.
You've got
it makes
quite
you realize it right away.
Yeah, you've got quite a broad range of product at Wembley, Russell. Are you seeing new demographic groups coming to you as customers? Maybe in terms of age range or in terms of length and stay. Is the customer group that you're aiming at broadening as the sector becomes more established?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I mean, if we look back 6 to 8 years ago, we sort of started as a proposition. It was for young professional renters, but this has rapidly evolved to capture everything from students to the retired. I mean, at Quintain Living, we've seen our average age profile move upwards since 2016, despite a heavy student intake over the last couple of years. This is mainly because our product and service proposition, as with the broader sector, appeals to a broader age demographic. We've seen an increase in families, so still relatively low in terms of proportion of our overall occupancy, but in 40 to 50-year-old renters increasing. But I do agree. I mean, as Clint sort of touched on there, it's sector awareness. We do need to work harder at talking to the broader sector. The product really does exist, but awareness is still low. Affordability remains a challenge, which is resulting in a rise in co-living, which is more affordable by virtue of smaller apartments, but makes up for it in heavy amenity offering. But we're still, in terms of planning use classes such as DMR and LLR, that's also helping lower income classes. Most developers, including QL, including us, we're fully integrating DMR into all of our offerings. But yeah, I think customer expectation is rapidly increasing as well. And we're sort of learning every day. We're still a very, very immature sector. Whilst we do have a lot of stock and we have a variety of product, which allows people to move and have more choice, it's a great thing in terms of retention. The customer expectations is something that we're seeing certainly since COVID, and not only in our sector, but also hospitality, I'm sure you'll agree, is somewhat changed over the last couple of years. And that's impacting, sort of the relatively immature experience in the sector as well. Unlike hotels, where you've got really well-established experience, it's something that we're still navigating through in our sector, I would say.
Yeah, Russell, I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball here. So you may or may not have the answer to this, but we'll see. When I toured one of your Wembley properties recently, I was struck by quite a high proportion of the residents there were from overseas. Are you starting to see a higher proportion of customers from the UK as people here become more comfortable with renting for longer and perhaps almost resigned to not owning a property, or at least not until later in their life stage? Are people becoming more comfortable with renting for longer, and is that increasing the number of UK customers in your developments, do you think?
Yeah, I'd say so. Our average length of tenure is increasing, and that's a reflection of what they're experiencing. I wouldn't say that. I'd say we do have quite a large proportion of overseas students, for example, but it's by no means the majority. Again, it's just, I think we need work. We have so much work to do in terms of recognition of the sector, separating us from general PRS. And to Clint's point, again, it's really important in terms of educating councils to see us as a really sort of independent asset class that deserves, a different focus in certain areas to free up more development, basically.
Yeah.
If I could just add to that, George, I mean, there is a survey every year of who lives in build to rent, which is the UKAA is a partner of that process, and it bears out a very, very diverse profile of people in the sector. Now, the new one's just about to kick off, and we'll see how that's changed. But it is very, very, it's a wonderfully rich mix of people.
Okay, that's interesting. I look forward to reading the next one. While I've got you there, Brendan, there's a lot of very, very smart build to rent product, but you get what you pay for. Is the sector doing enough to cater for middle and lower income renters? I mean, we're seeing housing associations in a tricky position at the moment, and especially if this right to buy for social housing units comes through, they're very worried about not being able to replace stock like for like. Is this an opportunity for the build to rent sector, do you think?
Certainly it is, and it's one that we're currently working on right now. So I think the housing is the registered or the RP's market, or the housing association, but it's slightly different. It may not always be so amenitized, but we must draw a distinction between perhaps an offer that they bring forward and just a middle market offer that may be more generally put forward from the private side as well. There's great and common overlap between them. The most important, they may not be so heavily amenitized, but the most important and largest difference in terms of amenity is service and the management that comes with that. So the biggest amenity is that it's well managed and it's well serviced, and you can rely upon that in a way that perhaps the rental market hasn't always been able to experience. Add to that, probably the next biggest amenity, or the most important amenity after that, is just the biggest, fattest broadband pipe you can find and stick it in. You know what I mean? That is really, really going to give you a great deal of customer satisfaction, I would argue. And then we talk about physical amenity. So I think the mid-market, or the mid-market, or the lower end of the market product is still evolving. Is there interest in it? Certainly. Is it from the housing association side only? No, it's from the private rental sector side as well. And we're starting to see some of that product come forward. I mean, Russell, I'm sure, has got within the mix up at Quintain a range of different types there. And you know, Busy Living, of course, have got their portfolio, which really, you know, positions itself in this market from the get-go. It is going to be a big market. In a lot of ways, I would just say we're working on it, and I think we'll start to see more and more product come forward that is particularly aimed at that market, or that segment of the market.
Thanks, Brendan. Russell, from an operator's perspective, we mentioned earlier the amenity arms race, and I was particularly impressed with the climbing wall, the kind of rotating climbing wall. That was a fantastic piece of kit, which I've never seen anywhere before. But it is what a customer expects in terms of amenities changing. Has it leveled out? Are we kind of at a point of equilibrium now, or do you think it's going to, the level of specification is going to have to keep going up and up?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to come back to you on your comment about the climbing wall, which has made my day, because I had to fight for that. I flew to Copenhagen in a day to go and see it and to come back and report on it, and actually missed my flight on the way back. But I love it too, so that's really, really, at least someone's happy, yay. So no, thanks for that.
Well, the guy who was using it at the time was very happy with it as well, and
excellent.
It was good to watch.
Really pleased to hear. I think just touching on what Brendan was saying, nail on the head, you know, customer service and broadband, key areas of priority, but customer service is just, big thing for us is keep it simple. Don't try to overcomplicate it. People just want reliability, consistency. And that is really important for the team, and for also to manage expectations of your residents. Really, really important. I think that, you know, as I mentioned earlier, customer expectation is rapidly increasing, especially for those who've experienced living in BTR. And there is a growing choice of product, style and service across the market, which gives obviously choice to renters. But one thing I would say though, about us, we designed our buildings without any data really in the sector so many years ago. And we had capital release to develop all at one time, basically. So we had a whole deadline for design cut off and so on, you know, for all our buildings, amenity spaces. And in hindsight, I would say that from an operational perspective, whilst those amenity spaces are fantastic, they really are cool. If anyone hasn't been to see them, you have to, and I'm happy to tour anyone. But operationally, I would rather centralize them for obvious reasons. Right now, they're quite well scattered, and that presents challenges. That's a big learning for us, which we've factored into our next development. But obviously, going back to the service point, all these amenity spaces are nothing without service. They can attract people in, but you can't retain people if you don't provide consistent awesome service. And when I say awesome service, that is ultimately consistency. Technology is playing a massively increasing role. An example being Resident App. It's becoming standard practice through which a renter can review and process their billing or interact with fellow residents. We're seeing a massive take up in interactions. There's one simple one, buy, swap, sell. It's our most popular group. And bits to communicate with the management as well, such as queries, maintenance, booking amenity spaces and so on. And most importantly, also more relevant, is understanding their sort of energy usage. And then obviously you've got Home Views, who provide transparent platforms through which residents can rate and compare BTR developments. And all this results in a manager on site having to be really slick behind the scenes, proactively delivering a seamless service to the customer and always looking at innovative ways to differentiate based on customer feedback and insights. So I think going back to your question is more, people just need, what we've seen over the last 2 years, because obviously it's shifted because of COVID, but people like to have that place to escape from their apartment but not travel too far from home. So what we're looking at is more sort of co-working spaces, but designed in a way that you can segregate. It's future-proof, so you can break it all down and change it without there being significant cost, and to respond to what residents are saying they want. Because whilst we think we know what people want right now, that could change in a few years. So designing in flexibility is really important to us. But right now, we're seeing that people want small spaces to be able to work from home, and that's like the biggest driver right now. And that's what we see a lot of our social spaces being used for. That, in addition to obviously the organised events that we do as well. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Russell.
Okay.
Clint, is amenity level, does it vary widely across the country according to the market, or is there a kind of basic standard now that everyone expects?
It does. No, there's no basic standard on amenity level. There's some basics that you would put into most buildings because there's the most attractive offering. A fitness center or a gym to that extent. People see the value in that right away. Then they know they don't have to join the gym down the street. So in their minds, they're saving 20 pounds a month or whatever it might be. So those are pretty obvious choices. But when you start to look at amenities, there's everybody puts the pictures of their biggest and best on their on everything they do. So every time you're seeing something, it looks so grand. Which some of them are beautiful buildings, but I'd say the majority of BTR stock they're very nice, well-appointed places, but it's not over the top. When you actually go to the majority of the units, there's some big towers in certain cities that just do shine, but then you go to some other places and you're like, okay, this is just nice rental stock, and it's really good. But there will always be an amenities race. There's always going to be something that's clever and somebody wants to get in, and it is listening to the customers and what they want. Russell mentioned it. It's just that is truly the focus. There is, with the ESG agendas that are coming and the initiatives are all coming on this, we're seeing more things, such as biophilia and the designing with plants and, natural woods and products, making sure that, light, air and water is, that's where people are looking for. I always say it's, those three things, then it's, safety and security. Those are what you have to make sure work. And when all those things are working, it's a product that anybody could live in. We are seeing some clever, amenities or, podcast rooms, green screens where people can do but that's because they're working from home and they need to do a podcast like I'm doing right now. They need a place to sit and do it quietly. So that type of thing, there's a lot of podcasters out in the world right now. But it's, I think we're seeing, those business shifts are allowing people to do things from home, and they're just finding places to do that at. And again, it's catering to what their needs are at this time, and then having flexible spaces that every few years you look at your surveys, you talk to your residents and say, what do you want and what are you looking for? And they'll tell you. And if it's I always say fitness, fashion, film, those kind of things, they're no-brainers. They've always been around. And then it is truly providing the service that makes those things inside your building work. And then you also have just making them integrated into the local community, because you might have a fitness center, all these things around that, just in those neighborhoods, and you just need to get them out there, get them about. And that's just, showing them where those things are at. And that just comes down to the service level being, communicating with them and make sure it's consistent.
Yeah. Thanks, Clint. Brendan, Clint mentioned the ESG agenda there. Who is driving it in the sector? Is it being driven by customer demand, or is it the institutional investors who, in the last sort of year, 18 months or so, have started taking this very seriously indeed? Is it top down or bottom up?
In reality, I think it's both, but I think the investment world is greening, and I think the consumer world is greening. I think that more pressure will be exerted by capital than by, at the moment, depending on which research group you go to, consumers are not necessarily willing to pay a lot more for a very, very green building, if you like. I think that will change fairly quickly, but at the moment, there's still some resistance. They expect it to be at that standard already, rather than recognizing there may be a cost of getting it there. But certainly from an ESG perspective, from the top down, I think that's coming like a tsunami. And we need to understand that and recognize it. Within that, the E is the most understood. And we're looking at carbon reduction strategies. And really, we've got to a point where we understand zero carbon in use. But really, the industry only really worked that out about a month ago. And there's no buildings that have achieved that yet. They're still 3, 4, 5 years away. We've done a lot of great work in reducing carbon in use, but we're not there yet. And I think we need to recognize where we are in this journey. The real issue is embedded carbon. And that journey is really just where we're packing the bags for that journey and haven't really started that yet. But thankfully, the building industry, and that becomes really a supply chain management piece. And that talks to the G of ESG. And thankfully, the construction industry has done this before at a smaller scale, but they have done this with FSC timber. And that took intergovernmental agreement and a whole supply chain and a lot of hard work and a lot of time to get that over the line. It may not be perfect, but we've shown we can do it. And I think that model could be expanded and scaled to look at carbon, embodied carbon within the industry. But the S of ESG, I think, is also an under-nurtured part of the ESG agenda. And I would say that the way that we start to deal with that is measuring the impact of our buildings on our customers, on our employees, on the people who deliver it, on the communities in which they sit. And even if at the moment we would report not great results, if we can improve on that year on year, we'll start to develop a really, really good momentum in both E, S, and G.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Clint, embedded carbon is an interesting one, and we have noticed from speaking to developers and architects and so on fairly recently that planners are becoming increasingly loath to grant consent for demolishing a building and putting something new in its place. Obviously, the vast majority of BTR inventory is new build. Are we going to have to see the industry becoming more versatile and converting buildings in future?
Yes, and we're seeing the same thing in different different developments. But it comes down to the viable. If the product that is there is not viable or can't be transferred over, there is a use for moving it on. It's educating the councils that building needs to come down. Yes, looking at old office blocks, looking at old listed beautiful buildings around this country, they're everywhere. But just finding sites that can be converted into beautiful new apartments without taking it all the way down, it's going to be something that most councils will want. The good thing about a lot of different cities around here, there is some beautiful topographies on the streets and some beautiful buildings. Is how do we work together with the councils to to make sure we can keep the retain some of the buildings to keep the the local character, but then also keep the carbon there, but then also bring something out of the top of it that makes it into an attractive new proposition for the city. But I think there's going to be a lot of that coming. But we're seeing most councils, as Brendan mentioned, is they're not they haven't learned the embedded piece of it yet. They've learned the other piece, and they're slowly learning that. But I think we as a sector should be educating them that we realize now there is an embedded carbon. That's our job to do that, and say this is how we're going to handle that, and this is why we should be doing that. It's not all about just taking a building down as fast as we can and rebuilding. It's putting the best product and best building we can in that location as developer. I think the environmental piece of ESG is the most known. But I always tell people it's not just about recycling. The social piece of it is where BTR really fits in well, because that's our service provisions we can put into that. And we can help that, we can look at well-being of, residents. We can, like I said, we're providing fitness areas, we're providing things, walking tracks, all the different things that will come in a BTR scheme, and actually thinking about how they live there day to day and getting, good air and good light, good water. Those things are important for the, the social piece of it. If that happens, that's where BTR will really, will win out in that. And we'll continue to manage that, and we'll govern it, because again, it's one institution, one operator that's going to be focusing on making sure we understand all those components and keeping track of it over time. And that's really what BTR can bring to it.
Yeah. On a related topic, Clint, we've got a question here from Philip Smith Lawrence, who's asking if particularly the single family market will be building using passive house principles. I know quite a few of the house builders now are building this way. Is this something that you're seeing come through the pipeline and the projects that are across your desk?
Not yet, but I think that it will be occurring. There's going to be ways to look at it. I mean, if you can, in a single family housing in the development, you can do that. So it's more attractive and more easy to progress with it. So I think that's what we're going to see. But we just haven't we've seen most people looking, again, house builders that are building houses, and they're saying, okay, how do we just, take our current product and just morph it just a little bit to become BTR? And it's like, no, we need to step back and think of how do we make this a proper way to put this together. But I think together we can all work on that and make a very good, and we'll make a very good product, and it's just going to take some time.
Yeah, thanks, Clint. Brendan, what can the UK learn from more established rental markets such as the US and Europe?
Oh, how long have we got? I mean, I think the short answer is, of course, there's an awful lot to learn. But the most important thing to recognize is that we need to find the Brit version of whatever we learn. And I think that process is now established and underway. Of course, the American market is very mature, and UKAA went out to the Apartmentalize event a couple of weeks back, came back with huge insights that we will take on and repackage a little bit to make them more appropriate for our markets. But certainly they are the hotbed and in terms of laboratories and those ideas coming across, and certainly in Europe as well. Although I think the American model, which has become a British version, is not that established in Europe, maybe perhaps Ireland and parts of Spain. But I think there's also stuff going back the other way. At the BizNow conference a month or two ago, the comment was made that the quality of our interiors of our buildings more generally is higher than the American markets in the main, and the value of that, both in terms of the asset value, but also how it attracts and helps to retain residents, is now manifest, and that's information which is going back across the pond. Certainly, I think we are now in a position where we're going to, it's not equal trading, but we will be increasingly moving, sharing our own experiences. And quite interestingly, we will be, as part of a broader look at the industry and around equality, diversity, and inclusion, we're going to be collaborating with our American cousins to do a survey which is consistent the same in the UK and in America, so we can compare how we're doing against each other. And I think these are the things, whilst not really majorly about the investment piece, but about the long-term value of the sector and how it will achieve its own legacy.
Thanks, Brendan. Russell, is there anything you've seen in developments that you might have looked at overseas that you?
Yeah, I think Danielle, actually, my boss, was the one who pointed out that, Brendan, wasn't she, about the difference in standards, which resonated. I think there's many learnings, but not everything is transferable, right, between the US and the UK. But I think the main obvious learning is the lag, a massive lag in technology and effective reporting between what we can produce now and what the US has been doing for so many years. Still very early stage in the UK. And there are plenty of companies creating, PMS systems and CRM solutions, but it still feels a little way off from the well-established US multifamily sector. Like hotels, it's Opera, or Hilton has On Q, but it's established, it's reportable, it's comparable. You have the STR reports. All the data is really widely shared in the hotel sector, and we need to get better at doing that over here. It needs to be embraced more in the UK. I know we talk about it a lot, but I don't see a lot of action behind it. It just seems slow to materialize. And one really good example would be Radix, which is a really good example of this. Those who haven't seen Radix, it's similar to hotel sector STR reporting, where you can see live rates and so on, and really use that information strategically to compare, openly compare with your competitors. So that's where I see the big lag, the tech, the CRM systems, the PMS solutions, the property management solutions. They're just still a long way to go.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Russell. And Clint,
I'll just make a comment. Yeah, we have in Cortland. Cortland is our parent company, and they run about 80,000 units in the U.S. And they when they come and see the products here, the different BTR products here, it is a good quality product that big BTR operators are putting together, and I think the specification is strong. I think on the U.S. side, it is what Russell was mentioning, it's the data sharing between people, between states, but between different communities, the way they can share data to work together to make sure if you want a cheaper product to be built in a community, if you all work together, you might be able to make a cheaper product because you would know exactly what you're what you're looking for in that community, or how to build it this way, or to do something this way, or don't do that because it didn't work. So it's really, that data is very, very valuable, and I think over time we'll get there in the UK, but there's a long way to go on that point. There is enough operational buildings up now. I think we can start to do it, and it's just it's getting everybody on the same page and to say, hey, how do we share resident data, and then look at our buildings and say, what did we do right, what did we do wrong, and just be honest with each other, and just say, how can we make these more effective for everybody, which in turn makes good return for investors and a better product for the end consumer, which is the resident.
Thanks, Clint. We are nearly out of time, but Clint, I just want to stick with you for 1 minute because we've got a final question from an audience member here. It's David Wilson. He's asking specifically about Scotland, and he says, are the panel concerned about the recent rent control legislation currently under consideration by the Scottish government?
Are we concerned? You're always concerned about it, but it's one of those things that I think they've been talking about it for a long time. It's one of, I think every, or there's different places that have been talking about rent control at different points. But I think that, it's going to come down to, there'll still be a rental market, there'll still be a rental product, but then it's just a matter of how do you, if they do put rent controls on it, how are we going to work around that to still develop homes for people to rent? It will just be, it'll slow down the market if it happens, which will slow down Scotland. It's just not a good thing, but we still think that there's enough movement, and that when people move from they're where they're living now and they move into a BTR scheme, it will open up different opportunities for those other places that they were. So it's we'll see how rent control could affect that, but are we concerned about it? I mean, yes, you don't want to see those types of things from an investment perspective, because people will not understand it. But over time, there's been rent controls in major cities at different times, in different places, and they've all gotten through it over time. You figure out how to get around it, or not around it, but just how to work with it. And that's how communities work. There's always something that happens that you have to work around, and that's just, working through planning and working through, the councils and how to make it work. So, but
excellent.
Yes,
Thank
yes
you.
and no,
Thank
if
you.
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Clint. Thanks to all of you for your contributions. I think it's been a great conversation, and an hour really probably isn't enough to do justice to all the topics that we had there. But I've enjoyed it a lot. I think it's been great. We're just going to show a couple of slides before we wrap up. So this is the last in the current series of Urban Living webinars. The new series starts in the autumn on the 21st of September, and they will be sponsored by Price Labs and by Minute. You can see our topics there, and you can also register for those. If you go to the chat, you'll see a link, so you can register for those sessions. We very recently held our flagship event in London, the Urban Living Festival, which took place at Canary Wharf on the 6th and 7th of July, and we're just going to give you a very quick flavour of that. The next in our Urban Living series of events are some live events in the autumn called Urban Living Insights. And the first one is debating the work office conundrum and the future of work, how that's all flexing and evolving. A very interesting topic. And if you'd like to get some tickets for that, you can see a link in the chat. And if you'd like to sponsor any of our webinars or our events, please get in touch with my colleague Katie, whose details are on the screen and also in the chat. So thanks for watching today, everyone. Thanks to Brendan, to Russell and to Clint for their contributions. I think it was a fascinating session. If you're on any of the social channels you can see on the screen, then give us a follow. We're quite active on all of those. You can also see the links in the chat. And because there has been so much information posted in the chat during the session, we're just going to leave a 2-minute countdown clock open so you can take some notes. That's enough for me. Thanks, Brendan, Russell and Clint. Thank you all for watching and enjoy the rest of your days. Thanks very much.